In October 1950, the British philosophical journal Mind published a 26-page article that would, in silence, redefine the future of humanity. Its author was a 38-year-old mathematician and cryptologist, famous for breaking German naval secret codes during the war, Alan Turing. His first sentence was a bombshell in the academic world. I propose to consider the question, can machines think? Turing knows that the word think is an undefinable semantic trap. To avoid getting bogged down in theological or metaphysical debates, he makes an engineer's choice. He replaces the question with a purely operational and behavioral test, the Imitation Game, which history will remember as the Turing Test. In its original version, the game involves three people: a man, denoted A, a woman, denoted B, and an interrogator, denoted C. Isolated, the interrogator must guess who is the man and who is the woman solely through typed conversations. The man's objective is to deceive the interrogator. To prove his femininity, he can lie, claiming, for example, to have hair cut short, about 9 inches long. The woman's objective is to help the interrogator by telling the strict truth. Then, Turing asks the crucial question: what will happen if a machine takes the role of the man, the role of A? Will the interrogator be mistaken as often as when the game is played between a man and a woman? Intelligence is no longer measured by what the machine feels, but by what it is capable of simulating in an indistinguishable manner. Turing then formulates a bold prediction for the time. Within 50 years, meaning in the year 2000, it will be possible to program computers with a memory capacity of about 125 megabytes to play the imitation game so well that an average interrogator will not have more than a 70% chance of making the right identification after 5 minutes of dialogue. The dream of the thinking machine was born, set down on a piece of paper. Turing's theoretical dream would become institutionalized 6 years later, during the summer of 1956, at Dartmouth. A young mathematics professor, John McCarthy, decided to gather the greatest minds in the country to launch a 2-month study project. Along with Marvin Minsky from Harvard, Nathaniel Rochester from IBM, and Claude Shannon from Bell Labs, he submitted a formal proposal to the Rockefeller Foundation in August 1955. Their premise was revolutionary. Every aspect of learning, or any other feature of intelligence, can, in principle, be so precisely described that a machine can be made to simulate it. They outlined 7 fundamental research axes, ranging from language manipulation to injecting randomness to simulate human creativity. The Rockefeller Foundation was skeptical of this seemingly overly visionary project and granted them only half the requested funding. But history was in motion. Among the participants, 2 men arrived with irrefutable proof under their arms: Alan Newell and Herbert Simon. With the help of programmer Cliff Shaw, they had designed the Logic Theorist, considered the very first artificial intelligence program in history. In January 1956, even before the conference began, they simulated the program by hand, distributing punch cards to their children and graduate students, with each person embodying a unit of code execution. Once programmed on an IBM computer at the Rand Corporation, the Logic Theorist achieved the impossible. It proved 38 of the first 52 theorems in the second chapter of Russell and Whitehead's Principia Mathematica. For Theorem 2.85, the machine even found a shorter and more elegant proof than the one written by hand by the original authors. Bertrand Russell himself expressed immense joy over it. But behind the smiles of the official Dartmouth College photo, the investigation reveals deep tensions and questions ignored by history books. Why did John McCarthy invent the term artificial intelligence? The answer is political. McCarthy wanted at all costs to sideline Norbert Wiener and his overwhelming concept of cybernetics, which he deemed too focused on analog and retroactive controls. It gets worse. Herb Simon and Alan Newell would accuse McCarthy of trying to claim paternity of the Logic Theorist during a major conference at MIT in September 1956. The negotiations were so tense that the session chair had to act as a mediator in the streets of Cambridge to avoid a public clash. Simon and Newell would forever reject the term artificial intelligence, preferring the expression complex information processing. And why did Turing, in his 1950 text, base his test on gender deception, a man imitating a woman, before replacing it with a machine imitating a human? Why is the woman described as having the worst possible strategy, that of simply telling the truth, ensuring her immediate defeat? Was there, in the mind of the father of computing, a hidden and intimate link between the repression of biological emotions, gender, and the pure logic of machines? To understand, we must explore a hypothesis that official science never addresses. The conceptual architecture of AI wasn't born from pure, cold abstraction, but from the personal tragedies of its creators. At the age of 17, Turing experienced his first platonic passion for a classmate, Christopher Morcom, who introduced him to science before dying suddenly of tuberculosis. Turing was devastated. In a heartbreaking letter to the deceased's mother, he wrote that Christopher's spirit would continue to live on through his own scientific work. Turing then formulated the hypothesis that the spirit is merely a mechanism temporarily attached to the body, and that upon physical death, this mechanism simply seeks a new shell. Wasn't the Imitation Game, played via remote teleprinter between pure minds stripped of their fleshy bodies, an unconscious attempt to resurrect Christopher Morcom in the form of a digital specter? In his 1950 article, to explain how to teach his child machine, Turing used a strange example, the poem Casabianca. It tells the true story of Giacomo Casabianca, a 13-year-old boy who preferred to burn alive on the deck of the flagship rather than flee without his father's order. For Turing, educating the machine required extreme discipline, a total sacrifice of biological instincts and bodily emotions in favor of established rules. AI, from its very genesis, was built on the fantasy of a disembodied mind, purified by the sacrifice of the body. In 1956, the pioneers left Dartmouth, convinced that human intelligence would be fully simulated in less than 20 years. Making logical deductions seemed so simple for the logic theorist. But they were going to hit an invisible wall, a bottleneck that no one had anticipated: common sense. Teaching a machine to prove mathematical theorems was easy. Teaching it what a 5-year-old child knows about the real world, like the fact that a silent piggy bank is empty, would prove to be computing's greatest challenge. Instead, they triggered a catastrophic collapse of funding and trust. The first AI winter was coming. Why were the most brilliant minds of the 20th century so heavily mistaken? How did Turing's dream almost extinguish forever? Like, comment, and share to unlock the next file. Join Neurixis and illuminate the hidden connections.